Hello, everybody. Sorry for the 2-minute delay start here, but we've got to talk some Pacers offseason. We'll let some people trickle in as this gets going so I can respond to people in chats, but we have so much to talk about. Busy Pacers offseason, a lot of it wrapping up in recent days. Yesterday, Pascal Siakam has his introductory press conference. Later this week, we'll get to talk to Obi Toppin. James Wiseman was in the Pacers facilities yesterday, and that's all the free agents that they signed. So we're going to talk some draft grades. We're going to talk some free agency grades. We're going to put it all together about what the Pacers did. Does it make sense? What does it mean for their next steps, and why some of this could be incomplete grades given their financial situation. But look, I think any starting conversation about the Pacers offseason and the grades is that they didn't have a lot of pads what they did, right? Given their financial situation, they couldn't open up significant salary cap space. They couldn't really go get another star by spending. So keeping Pascal Siakam was a lock. And just given how the NBA is, given how his finances set up, his full bird rights, all that kind of stuff, made all the sense in the world that Pascal Siakam was going to get a max or near max contract. In fact, I predicted one of two things would happen. I said he'd either sign a 5-year max with the Pacers because he's 30, get your money till 35, get the guaranteed cash now. What else are the Pacers going to do? Or option B is he signs a 2-year deal with a player option on the third year so that he can get back out on the market as a 32-year-old with 10 years of experience. Now, he did not do either of those things, which actually surprised me a little bit. Not that I'm advising him, or not that I would say he did something wrong. He is, of course, in charge of that destiny, of that fate. But he opted to do a 4-year deal, still at the max, $189 million, more than anybody else could pay him over that exact amount of time, right? So I think that is, of course, a natural way to look at things, is he maximized his 4-year earnings with the choice he made this summer. But he could have made more into other ways, or could have done some slightly different things if he wanted to change it. So 4-year max for Pascal Siakam is the biggest thing the Pacers did this summer. In fact, I said many times on podcasts and writing that if they re-sign Pascal Siakam, if the Pacers keep him in some way, then their offseason is already at worst like a C+, right? Because that means they're going to be good again next year. They're going to have a star with Tyrese Haliburton that makes a lot of sense, that is extremely talented, that makes this team a playoff contender, and if not way more, for years, right? That's extremely valuable of a player to have. So him being back is a huge win for the Pacers, obviously, right? Their team is good. They're going to be good for years now. But the 4-year deal makes this even better to me, right? The downside risk with Siakam would have been that he doesn't age very well. And I think that's a little overblown with guys who are 30. We just saw Drew Holiday go from 30 to 34, hardly to drop off at all, and then become exceedingly better, in fact, to the point that he got even more, another big contract at 34. So Siakam doing that the way he did does make sense, and perhaps he could age gracefully through this. But if there's any fear of decline, which does happen in the 30s to players, a 4-year deal cuts that down somewhat, right? If he's just as good as these last 2 years early in this deal, and we talked about this with him at his introductory press conference the other day about, what does better look like for you? Can you improve on this deal if you're Pascal Siakam? He kind of was like, yeah, I think I can, because the defense they run in Toronto is way different than the defense Indiana plays. And that took him a long time to adjust. Now he'll have a whole offseason, a whole training camp, a bunch of stuff to be a better defender for this Pacers team. His shot will need work, but the Pacers have been shot doctor adjacent for a lot of guys. Aaron Nesmith, Obi Toppin, Jalen Smith, to name a few, who have gotten better as shooters here. If Pascal can become a 36 to 38% guy, thanks, Lottie Dottie. I appreciate that. That's huge, right? That would be massive for them if he could improve in any way. And he talked about some of that stuff already. So as he blends into this team style and gets better, that would, of course, make this deal look better. But already, I think the fact that even if he is just exactly the level of player he just was with the Pacers for the next 2 years, then he's fairly paid, right? That's a top 30 player making max money. That makes sense. So maybe there's going to be issues on the back end of him being overpaid, for example, but maybe not. And maybe you're okay with that as the Pacers if he's better the first 2 years, or at least good enough. And so I think the Siakam deal is hard to give any lower grade than a B. And I would even probably go higher than that. Like Rick Carlisle and Kevin Pritchard said it yesterday at the press conference. This is the best free agent the Pacers have ever signed. And I get that the difference is he was already on the team. David West came from a different team, for example, but huge to be able to secure someone like that And so it can't be worse than a CC plus to me. And the fact that it's not a 5-year deal, which gets rid of some of their downside risk, but it's still long, meaning Siakam and Halliburton are paired together through 2028. That's a really big win for the Pacers to me. So the first deal for them this offseason, Pascal Siakam, heard it right at the finals. I give that a B plus, I would say. The only way they could have gotten it a little higher is if it was maybe sub-max, maybe 5 years, but like not guaranteed last season or something. But that's obviously way too aggressive negotiations for a star player that you're just dying to keep in-house. So probably not realistic, even though that's the only way this could have been an A. The second thing the Pacers did, and an expected thing from me, although not everybody, was Obi Toppin, keeping Obi Toppin in-house for this Pacers team. I viewed it as important because he's good. That's an obvious starting point for any discussions about the Pacers summer is he's a good player who fits really well. And I was actually a little skeptical of that acquisition when it happened because he's good in transition. He could fly above the rim. He could dunk. That's going to fit with Tyrese Halliburton. That's going to fit with the Pacers style. That's going to make them good. That's going to make him look good. And he started the season as a starter for a reason. His pairing with Halliburton was significant. But when he got benched, I wondered what this would look like. Getting benched is strong. They just changed things up. It's not like he was demoted or playing bad. But with Obi, the fact that he grew into the shooter and hit 40% of his threes and that carried into the playoffs, that made him fit with anybody, right? And so when he was playing with these bench groups without Halliburton, the thought was, how effective can he be when he was specifically identified to play in these lineups in this way? Well, he was great, right? He fit well with the bench groups. He shot it very well. He could play small ball 5 at times when he needed him with the starters, right? He just fit so well stylistically with the team that it didn't matter that he was just thought of as, thank you guys for all the nice comments about the podcast. It didn't matter that he was just limited to transition play, right? The fact that he could do more than that made him such a good fit with this team. And so that alone made me think, they should keep him. And they made him a restricted free agent. It was very obvious that was the path they were going to take. If you want to take it a step further, though, with Obi, they were kind of having to decide if they wanted to, I don't know if this was a real decision internally, but financially it was either him or an external free agent with the MLE. And I said the whole time, I would keep Obi Toppin because in a market like Indiana, keeping player rights of good players is a good idea, especially if you can get them on a contract that is good and makes sense and is potentially tradable over the next lifespan. My predicted fake contract for Obi Toppin, for those who listen to the podcast that you've seen a lot of comments about on the side, was 3 years, $45 million. So $15 million a year. He got 4 years, $60 million. That's $15 million a year. I actually thought he would take a shorter deal because of his age. Getting back out on the market in your mid-20s is valuable. That obviously didn't happen. 4 years is still fine for him. He'll be a free agent at 30. We just saw what Pascal Siakam had happen at 30. But I think that's a fine deal for Toppin's contribution level. Good bench players cost about that at that spot, right? Grant Williams, PJ Washington. I had a couple other notes of comparable contracts of recent seasons. Brendan Clark. So this makes sense to me as a price point for Toppin. It might be a little on the high side just because it's such a long deal, but certainly tradable. Not a bad contract at all. Good player. Will fit with the Pacers. It's hard to give that a bad grade. The length is maybe a little long, and the price is probably the high end of what is acceptable for Toppin. And the reason that this grade could have gone higher, you don't want to be the team that does this, right? But everybody always talks about teams using restricted free agency to their advantage as leverage, right? Last year, the Hornets and PJ Washington never agreed to anything. They waited a long time. They got to August. Finally, PJ Washington resigns, right? Because he was restricted free agent. There's nowhere he could go that could have paid him and made sense in the way that Charlotte could have. And so they just waited it out. And so in theory, the Pacers could have done that. You don't want to have to do that if you're the team of the player. But it certainly makes sense as a strategy. So that would have been the way that they could have maybe squeezed this out to like 4 for $48 or something like that. But it's a fine deal. He fits really well. And keeping good players is alone a good thing. So I think the average annual value is about what I expected. I would give that a B minus, right? So 2 Bs, 2 B minuses so far. There's also a poll on here for those who can see it about the Pacers offseason grade. Seems like most people are so far about where I am. I'm curious where people land. I wish I had a 5th option so I could have put F, but I don't think anybody's giving an F. I'll answer a couple questions. Crutchfield34 says, what is McConnell's contract? This is the last year of his deal, actually, fully guaranteed at $9.3 million. He is extension eligible, though, right now. He could sign an extension as I'm talking, for example. Their future finances make it tricky. He's clearly good. He fits their style. He had just had a career year at 32. By the way, for anyone concerned about Siakam's contract aging, I would point to TJ McConnell just now having his best season ever at 32 as a maybe hold that thought kind of thing. But yeah, McConnell entering the final year of his deal. He'll be an unrestricted free agent next year, but his contract can be extended. A lot of comments about aggressive Halliburton. Yeah, I agree. I mean, when he was a star at the beginning of the season, that was the Pacers, right? Their whole team was him being an unbelievable. I think that Siakam is a star, though. Love Jones 31. He didn't put Siakam in there. I think he is. But I certainly agree that another talented player at some point would be the requirement to get to, perennial conference final level thought of. Lottie Dottie, I like that Obi played good defense on Bobby Portis. Yes, that was huge. I thought Ijax actually defended pretty well in the Knicks series specifically because he was guarding centers, but in that Bucks series, Obi being okay as a reserve 5, especially because of his defense, was massive. And another reason, again, to keep him. With the way the roster is constructed right now, is a trade for Lauri Markkanen at all possible? I mean, yeah, contractually they could match salaries and get Markkanen, and he'd be a wonderful fit on every team in the league. Great player. It'd be really hard for the Pacers to pay him and keep their team together, which is why a trade like that is tricky unless they're getting like some other young cost-controlled talent in the deal, and then they have to give up a lot. It's possible, though. I certainly have kind of ruled it out in my own head, given the Pacers team and what it looks like, but it's possible. Do they have any plans to improve defensive rebounding? As well as we shoot, I do not think offensive rebounding is an issue. Yeah, I agree that. I mean, the team has said it, James Sluss, that they need to get better defending and on the glass. Siakam was a good rebounder for them, right? Toppin got better as a rebounder, but still they need to take strides in both of those categories right now. And I don't really know how the hope for that would go. Matherin's a good rebounder for a guard. Maybe having him back helps in some ways. Defensively, they're just going to have to be much better as a team, right? They're largely running back the same group, and defensive growth can just happen for young guys at some point. They have a lot of guys whose traits suggest they shouldn't be as bad as the team is defensively, but given the level that they're at, I think additions wise, they'll just hope it's internal improvement. I agree with Lottie Dottie that developing young guys should be the goal for the Pacers to get some of those traits on the floor, right? Walker seems like he should be a defender and rebounder. Same with Matherin. Shepard is a decent defender already, and Wiseman is a good rebounder. That's probably his only plus trait. Is starting Walker at 3 a way of improving defensive rebounding? Yeah, I mean, he's not going to start at the 3, but if he plays on the wing, that certainly would help, right? He's got the linebacker-ish size that if he's able to shut down somebody at the 3 spot, I think that's a significant season for him, and I think that's the position they're playing him in Summer League. I think that makes a lot of sense for what he's going to be asked to do for the Pacers long term. How can he play the season? I don't know. And yes, I agree with whoever said no one wants to deal with Danny Ainge. If you're trading for Lauri Markkanen, you were trading a lot for Lauri Markkanen. If this season doesn't start well, we should trade Matherin, Siakam, and TJ for Devin Booker and filler. While the Suns would not accept that trade, I would imagine you'd have to include a lot of picks to do that. But obviously, Devin Booker would be a great player. He would fit on any team. Let's keep running through some grades of offseason stuff. I want to get to the draft in a second. But James Wiseman was their signing. And funnily enough, this is actually going to be probably my biggest disagreement with the public. So I get the purpose of this, obviously, right? Jalen Smith leaves. You need a center. I talked about that. I said, I think they're going to sign a third center. We've seen all throughout the history of this Pacers front office, even when they had Sabonis and Turner on the team and Goga, they would try to have another backup center in the mix. And so I thought for sure they'd sign a third center behind Turner and Isaiah Jackson. My thought was they'd go a different route. I thought they were going to go the veteran route. This team is trying to win, right? They're not really in development mode anymore. So I thought they'd sniff around at your, Cody Zeller type players, although he ended up being in a big sign-in trade, or just any minimum center who shakes available that is a good player. There's a bunch of those every year of, giant guys looking for any team to stick on. And so I thought that's the route they would look to go. Instead, they go the opposite direction. They go very unproven guy who has struggled everywhere he's been in Wiseman. But I get the bet, right? Their bet is, hey, we have turned these young guys in that draft class specifically into good players, right? Jalen Smith, who just left among them. Jalen Smith went from a guy who got his option declined by the Suns to a $9 million a year player signing with the Bulls. But Jalen Smith, Nesmith from out of the rotation to good. Obi Toppin from back into the rotation to pretty good. Jordan Nwora got better as a passer here. Even Tyrese Halliburton got better with the Pacers, right? A lot of guys in this current era of the Pacers have come to Indiana and gotten better. And so the bet from the Pacers is they can do that with James Wiseman. Right, he was out of the rotation to start last year with Detroit, didn't play very well, struggled with the Warriors, but he's huge and fast, right? Those quality of traits are something worth exploring. I think the contract the Pacers gave him shows that they know there's risk involved. Only $500,000 guaranteed this season, so about 1/4, 1/5 of his total money. So if he still stinks for them, he can't develop, he can't do the stuff. He's either got to become a defender or add some range. Because right now he can rebound, and he certainly has high highlights. Like I tweeted before they signed him, I was interacting with somebody else, that I think he can be a good player. I think there's something there, but for what the Pacers need, which is, if they're playing James Wiseman, it's either garbage time or they have an injury and they need him to produce. It's a little trickier. So I actually think they went the wrong direction with, I get it. This has high upside, right? This is a no risk move with upside. That's great. But I would have gone a different direction with this. I give this a C-, and I think it's an interesting bet by the Pacers on their own development. Yeah, I see, like, there's a comment here. Wiseman takes Ajax minutes by the end of the season. That would really surprise me, because Isaiah Jackson is very mobile, fits their style defensively, is kind of the what we saw be very successful in the playoffs with these lob threat bigs, right? And he actually made shots in the paint, especially against the Knicks, less so against the Celtics, that weren't dunks, right? That mattered a lot. I think Isaiah Jackson is a very mobile and smart defender in ways we've never seen from Wiseman. I think that would matter. We failed Jalen Smith. He improved a lot. We let him ride the bench. Well, yes and no. Like, he was great for the first 3.5, 4 months of the season, but once his shot faded away, he wasn't contributing enough, right? Isaiah Jackson, slightly better as a defender, way more mobile, and so when Smith's confidence went away, that really affected him a great deal, I think, and he never got it back. And so I think he's good. Like, it sucks to lose him if you're the Pacers, but they couldn't afford him, and the way the season ended, I think it made sense that I don't think they failed him at all. They got him $27 million he wouldn't have had. When do you think is the best time for the inevitable consolidation trade? Yeah, that is a fascinating question, because it likely has to be in the next 12 months, 18 months, right? Given the way their team is set up. I think next offseason makes a lot of sense, because this year's still going to be like, they have expectations, but are trying to discover how good they can be, with Mathurin back in, with Walker developing, with all their young guys taking a step forward. But at some point, their salaries say they're going to have to trade some expensive guys for like one guy who's good and less expensive, and then get some other. It's just very tricky. They have no bad contracts, which is great, but they have too many contracts. So a consolidation trade pretty much has to come. I don't know who it would involve, but I would guess about a year from now, that is a very big discussion as Miles Turner is up for a new deal. How can they fit all this in and make their team make sense? Do I believe that Rick is the right coach to develop? Oh yeah, absolutely. He's become such a development mind in Indiana. Like, look who has developed here. Like, everybody who's come here has developed. I think it's wrong to say. I agree with that. Rick Carlisle was not as good at this before Indiana, right? He was certainly a winner's coach, brought to Indiana even to win, but because of the way the Pacers trajectory forced him to be, he had to become more development coach, and he really grew to like that. He talked about that at the end of last season, and the track record speaks for itself. Like, maybe they've just gotten extremely lucky, but like, all these young guys that have come here, I'm in Gainbridge Fieldhouse, this building, have gotten better and looked like a better player by the end of the time they've left or the time they've ascended, whatever. So yes, I do think Rick's actually become a pretty good development coach, and their staff has done well getting better. Ajax has the IQ of a rock. He definitely used to. Big problem for him. He'd have a lot of dumb fouls, dumb screens, and stupid moments. But I don't think that was really the case as much last year. The only thing is he just jumps a little too much. Yes, exactly, Donkey Kong. I did question Obi's fit at first. That's 100% right. But once the three started falling, he fit with the bench. Bingo, he was great. And so if Wiseman can hit threes or develop some range like Obi did, then great. Yeah, he'll definitely fit better than I think. And my comments about his immediate level to contribute won't matter, because he'll be good in that reality. But you are correct. I was questioning that a little bit at the time it happened, and the Pacers developed Obi and made him better, and it was great. If they develop Wiseman and or Ajax, Miles will be involved in a sign and trade next offseason. Maybe so. Sign and trade would be tricky because they're close to the aprons, and Ajax is also a free agent. So even if they develop him, bummer. He might just leave anyway because their team's expensive. So their center position's really in flux. In fact, for those of you who are here that listen to Locked On Pacers, that's going to be the topic du jour tomorrow, is the center position, because the Pacers are pretty locked in everywhere else contractually, maybe not at the two. And as someone just asked about the two, but their center spot is very fascinating to me. Who takes a bigger jump this year, Nembhard or Mathurin? I'm just so high on Andrew Nembhard that I want to say him, but Mathurin has more room to grow into. And I think he had some key realizations about his talent level and fit with the team that make Mathurin my answer, even though I think Nembhard's going to take a big step this season. Expectations for Jarris with Obi re-signing? Good question, Dr. GP. I just talked about this on my podcast yesterday because Rick Carlisle had this very long answer about Jarris on a radio interview he had. I think Jarris is going to play more this year because he's going to be the 11th man, but he is the first in line for minutes if there's an injury anywhere, right? If a point guard gets hurt, Nembhard moves down, someone else moves down to the 2, Jarris can now play the 3. If a shooting guard gets hurt, Ben Shepherd goes down to 2, Jarris Walker is your backup 3. If a 3 gets hurt, Jarris Walker is your backup 3. If a 4 gets hurt, Jarris Walker is your backup 4. If a 5 gets hurt, Obi Toppin can become your backup 5, and Jarris is now your backup 4. Maybe they would go to Wiseman there, but like there's so many more paths to minutes, whereas last year with Jordan Nwora and Doug McDermott and Bruce Brown and Buddy Hield, including all the players they already had, they didn't have that kind of route. So I still think he'll be out of the rotation, like fully healthy to open the season, but I think he is the first in line to play with any injury, and I think he'll be better. So I think he'll end up playing much more, and they'll get a good sense of what he is, what he can be, and how they can use him going forward. Do they need to make one more move? Are they done for now? I mean, do they make one more move? They can fit in a minimum player. I don't think that's what you're asking, because that's kind of boring. They have the mechanisms to fit in a 1-year minimum contract, so maybe they make one more move, but it won't be anything like so grand or splashy or exciting that fans are tripping all over themselves to talk about. Let's talk about the draft for some grades. For people who have voted in the poll, I agree with a lot of you that the BA range is where it is. I mean, the only way this could have gotten better is if their contract negotiation was a little more favorable, for lack of a better term, but I don't know what else they could have done. I mean, they were over the cap. This was the reality they were built with, and if they used the mid-level exception, they couldn't have kept Obi Toppin. So this is kind of how I thought their offseason would go in this BA range. The draft is really fascinating, right? Because Johnny Furphy fell to 35. So perhaps there's something about him that means he should have gone 35, right? And so maybe I shouldn't be using the fact that he was a green room invite as a plus. Rick Carlisle said on this radio interview that good point, Indy Fan 317. Good draft class to not have a first rounder, except they got a guy who was like commonly thought of as a first rounder. Rick Carlisle said on the radio that they had him 14th, or at least the scouts did. I think that was very interesting to hear him say. But the thing about Furphy is, whatever the reason is, he fell to 35th. He was a green room invite, and the green room is sent by like teams submitting players I think should be there because they want the guys to get picked who are there. So it's like teams thought of him as a top 25 guy. This isn't just some made-up mock draft nonsense. So they got him at 35. I think that's a good idea. And I suggested that the Pacers should pick at 36 before they traded up all offseason, because eventually their next big trade is going to be players, young players, for someone better than those young players. It's just how they're set up, right? We already talked about the consolidation trade in this live stream. And so when that happens, they're not going to have as much young talent on the team. And so they want high upside guys. And so Furphy was easily the highest upside guy left. To get him at 35, I think was good and matches what I would have been trying to do as the Pacers, because they can't offer minutes. There's no point of drafting with your good pick, 36, good, air quotes, with your good pick, someone who is 22 and isn't going to play, right? It made sense last year to take all kinds of guys because they thought they were going to be a development team, but then they were winning a lot. So now it made sense to do the project. I liked the Furphy pick because of that. I think it made a lot of sense to trade up to get him because of that. I give that move an A, right? If teams actually viewed him as a top 25 guy and all they had to give up is cash to get him with the picks they already had, I think that was a very good move and very shrewd. That's probably the best offseason move compared to what I expected for the Pacers. Tristan Newton at 49, Enrique Freeman at 50. It's hard to have any real opinions about late second rounders, right? You're just looking for guys who have a path to getting on an NBA floor. Enrique Freeman's rebounding looks incredible, but you know, his journey is awesome. I just wrote a story on him I recommend you guys read. Tristan Newton, 6'5" guards who can create shots. Again, maybe there's a chance this guy ends up in the NBA floor. I can't say I would have done something different late in the second round. I had guys I liked and did not like, but I had no negative opinion of either of these guys. I can't really grade the picks without having watched a ton of their tape, but it makes sense for what I'd be looking for in two-way contracts, and they love having ball handlers with those two-ways, so Newton makes sense in that way. So I think those picks are fine. B+. You know, yeah, do like Newton, proven winner, that too, right? Transfers to UConn, instantly 2 titles. And they played 2 very different styles on those teams. One team shot a lot more threes. One team was a little more free-flowing, playing through the post, right? So the fact that he could adapt to that was impressive. And I just like tall guards, right? I think that's a very valuable thing to have positional size. Tristan Newton certainly has that. So I like that pick a lot. And Freeman just seems like a good dude. I need to watch him play. He's pretty old. I can't say I watched any Akron basketball. I did watch UConn because they were in the championship game. I watched Furphy play against IU where I went, but I don't have a ton. I got to dive into their film more as the offseason goes. Yeah, and he does hit a lot of big-time shots. Good point, Donkey Kong 32, who's a UConn fan. I'm excited to see Tristan Newton this year. I really am. And he just seems very poised and mature in his interviews too, right? Which is such like a nonsense thing. Like, are you good at basketball or not should be 90% of what matters. But he's an impressive kid. I'm looking forward to seeing him play. So those two picks, I guess they're not bad. They're above average to me because I see the skill that would get them on the floor from a 2A contract. The only question I haven't answered in the chat, are you expecting Nesmith to stay at the 3? Yeah, for now. I think they're starting 5 as of right now. Entering next season would be the same as what they closed last season with. I do wonder if Nembhard, we'll talk about Nembhard in a second, but if they eventually can't retain Nembhard for whatever reason, Nesmith at the 2 has made sense to me, especially if they go with like a jumbo group with Nesmith and Siakam at the 3 and top end of the 4 and then a center. There's just a lot of paths for that to go, because Nembhard's contractual reality is going to be interesting. He could probably get more from another team, but if he's a restricted free agent, the Pacers can just keep him. So how he shakes out will be really interesting to me, because he'd be a valuable trade chip for lots of teams because of restricted free agency, and he's a good player. But I think the Pacers should keep him because he's a good young player. So how they opt to balance all of those things and figure out what to do with him will be interesting. But I think Nesmith, I expect him to stay at the 3. He's I wouldn't say undersized. He's like slightly below average, I guess, but he's bulky enough that it doesn't matter. So I think that makes a lot of sense. So the only move for the Pacers that I'd give less than an average grade to is Wiseman. And that's just because my philosophy for how I would have been handling free agency as the Pacers this summer appears to be different than what they were thinking at that spot. And I can't knock the philosophy, right? They've done well with this exact kind of stuff, right? Picking up young guys who haven't performed well from other teams, get them in the program and get them better. I can't fault that strategy. So I think that makes a lot of sense. I think it was smart of the Pacers to keep doing something that's working for them, but that's the only one that I think I would have gone a different direction. And so it's hard for me to give them a bad offseason grade, right? In fact, I gave them a pretty good offseason grade with no moves less than a B, but I didn't give them any A's. I think I'd probably give them a B+ this summer. Again, to get into the A range, they would have needed to either be a lot more like stringent with contracts, which is not, you don't want to be that team, especially with Siakam. You just give him whatever he wants. Maybe more so with Top, and especially I think he's the one that you could have thought about that with. But my projection right now would be that their 2 ways will be Quentin Jackson, Enrique Freeman, and Tristan Newton. That makes sense to me. Quentin Jackson was awesome on 2A last year. Maybe Oscar Tshiebwe gets one of those. I think the Wiseman signing hurts Tshiebwe's chances. We'll see. But those would be fine 2-way signings, right? So it's like I can't really nitpick anything. Their 15th roster spot's not going to matter. It's not going to be someone who plays. If they do sign a minimum guy, maybe it's James Johnson, maybe it's that young. It's going to be a vet if they do it. And so if they sign another young guy with spot 15, I would give that bad marks as well. But it's really hard for me to nitpick anything they did. But it's also not a ton of like, oh, this was so amazing, kind of like A+ stuff. So if I have to grade the Pacers off season, give it a B+. A- B+ range. I think it's good stuff. I think it made sense given the path they had available, right? Had Obi Toppin gotten a balloon offer somewhere else, they could have gone and used the MLE. They didn't need to. They kept Siakam. That was the most important thing. And now we're here. I'll take some chat stuff before I get out of here. Consolidation trade should include Turner and Obi or Nesmith. Team doesn't struggle to score. Turner's production could easily be replaced by oh no, I do not agree that Turner's production could be easily replaced by a low-cost hard screening and cutting center. Because if that was true, every team would try to do that. It would take at least a $15 million a year center to replace his offensive impact. Paying Mather and Nembhard, I agree with all that. But they definitely need, and I agree with you that they need to improve their rebounding, but I do not agree that they could easily replace Turner's production. But Turner's a fascinating guy going forward because Nick Claxton, Isaiah Hartenstein just got $25 million a year. He's certainly going to be looking for that next year, if not more. Do you think 2A should be used towards younger guys? Quinn's a little older, 20. Yes, he is about 26 or 27. I don't know. There's a lot of talk about this actually when I talk to people around the league. Like, should a 2A contract be a development contract because the guy's in the G League, or someone who can actually help you play because they are on your NBA rosters? Well, I think there's an argument to have some of both. My pitch would be that if you have 3 2A spots, one of them should be someone who can help your team if there's injuries, and 2 of them should be development spots. Because if you're really injured, especially, and the Pacers, they said this, like when they signed Dwayne Washington to 2A years ago, they were talking about how they like having ball handlers on 2A. It's like you never want to be in a spot where you don't have enough point guards or ball handlers, right? So even if Quentin Jackson's older, if Halliburton and Nembhard are hurt at the same time, he'd probably be with the team and he'd be fine. He's good. Like I watched him with the Mad Ants in person last year and was very impressed. So I get what you're saying. And I do think 2As should be primarily development based or like just trying to find somebody. But I do think now that you have 3, having one, like, yeah, this guy could play, player. Like Trevelyan Queen was perfect, right? He just signed his 4th two-way now with the Magic. Like, that's a perfect guy. I think the Pacers get the credit for not going crazy moving young guys. I agree. Great point. It's hard to be patient, but their runway with Halliburton's really long, and they have a lot of high ceiling guys. I very much agree with Bauer. He 0-0-0. All right, my time is running out, and there's about to be an event here, so I have to go. But thank you all for tuning in. This was very fun. I really enjoyed doing these, answering questions, talking about Pacers stuff. We'll see if we get to do another one pretty soon. This was my 3rd one of this free agency cycle. Summer League's coming up. I'll be out in Vegas, so looking forward to that. It's going to be great. But yeah, thank you all for tuning in, dropping stuff in the chat. Really appreciate it. Take care, everybody. See you soon.